Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for a bonus episode this week, where we'll be addressing the Patriots midseason evaluation and previewing their upcoming game versus the Panthers. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary for news on the day. So just to start, Kevin, I know we're sort of at the halfway point. Typically for a 16-game season, halfway points after the 8th game. Since it's now a 17-game season, it's technically going to be at halftime of upcoming Sunday. But since it's what a typical season would be, the halfway point through 8 games. What are your thoughts on how the Patriots have been so far? What would you say the grades? What are some grades you would give them for offense, defense, special teams, team as a whole? And is it where you thought they'd be as of now?
Yeah, I think this is really kind of a tough question when you first posed it to me before this episode. And something that it's really kind of tough to grade just based on how the team is going. But so when I first look at the offense, I'd say I give them a B. And I think that may be being a little generous. But I think they're kind of meeting my expectations of where they'd be. We know that this is going to be a work in progress. Going into the season, we had said as long as they're able to run the ball, as long as they're able to play good defense, the rest of the passing offense will kind of grow into that. And I actually kind of feel like the passing offense wasn't that big of an issue other than kind of red zone area. And there was more of the run and the offensive line. So I would say a B is actually probably pretty generous. I'd probably, now I'm kind of really talking to myself, I'd probably maybe say C plus. So I may actually change it. C plus, I'm actually going to say. But I think they're meeting my expectations in a way. I think the running game and the offensive line in the beginning of the season was below my expectations. And we had talked about this previously, where the line and the running game were supposed to be probably the biggest impacts of the team. And They were probably one of the worst aspects of the offense, but they've improved drastically since they've changed kind of those line combinations. And then Harris has looked better and better each game. And Mac again he's exceeded my expectations for this season. I had, I think, pretty decent expectations for him, but there's a lot of the times when I'm watching and I just think, like, how the hell is this kid a rookie? He does not play like it. He doesn't look like it. And when you compare him to the other rookies that are playing right now, he grades out better on PFF. And I know you can't really always look at those, but he just looks the part. Defense, I would give them probably a C minus. The last 2 games, I'm hoping we're a step in the right direction. They've been one of your weaker links on this team when those kind of gut to have it moments. Other than the Cowboys game, they were actually pretty good about shutting teams down to a point, but it's when you needed to have that stop where they could not do it. And it was finally the last game where they were able to do so. But I don't think they were performing the way we were expecting. They were supposed to be the part of the team that made them win, that we could rely on them. And some of the play calling, some of the execution wasn't there. It looks like it's starting to get better, but I'd say the first half, I'd give them probably C minus for that. And then special teams is not really much to talk about. I'd say B minus. And the only reason why that's as high of a grade as give them so far is because Big Dick Nick is nailing every single kick that he's got. But the punt unit overall hasn't been good at all. And they've had a few punts blocked just because of poor coverage from that unit. And the punting overall, I don't think has been anywhere near the level what it should be. And there's been a lot of punts where he hasn't been able to get it kind of like he used to get within the 10-yard line or so, have some really high punts. I think his punts have been pretty poor this year compared to years past. But I would say based on the kicking game itself with Falk, that kind of raises everything else. So I'd say B minus of that. I'd say overall for a team, I'd say probably C plus for the team overall. How about you?
Okay. Yeah, no, this is tough, like you said, just because they've just been so inconsistent this year. Thinking of it overall, I think offense, I have to go B minus. I think the offensive line was atrocious the first 4 weeks, and that's part of the reason why it's brought down a little bit, just because since it was so bad, they couldn't run the ball, and then Mac barely had any time to pass. I think what brought it up a little bit is the last 4 weeks offensive line has actually been pretty good. They've been able to run the ball like we thought they'd be able to. And then Mac has just completely just by far exceeding expectations. For a rookie quarterback going into the year, I was thinking I'd be happy if he threw maybe 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. A good game manager. He won't win you the games. He won't lose you the games. He's been by far exceeding that. For just using his numbers, projected them to a 16-game season, just so the stats can be comparable to previous years. The 17 game kind of screws things up, but he's pretty much on pace for 4,000 yards, which is pretty insane for a rookie quarterback that only had 1 year of playing in college, essentially. I know he was a redshirt senior, but he only actually started 1 year, which is something that a lot of people forget. The way he's progressing, the way he's reading the field is just phenomenal. Dan Orlovsky said this past week, a couple of days ago, that the way he reads a defense is the best he's ever seen a rookie read a defense and make plays accordingly, which I kind of have to agree with. So I think he's far exceeded expectations, and he just keeps getting better. If the offensive line can start improving, I think that the offense can get better and get better than I'd expected them to be this year. And the other thing that's just been holding them back a little bit is in just key situations, they're just having miscues. Lots of fumbles, the 2 Damian Harris fumbles, the 2 Kendrick Bourne fumbles, the Stevenson fumble, holding penalties on big yard gains. We even saw that this week with the Kendrick Bourne fumble. We saw Haran have a holding call that negated a Harris touchdown. We saw Wynn have a holding call that negated a 30-yard run. So it's those key issues that are holding them back, but it looks like they're going a step in the right direction. So I'd have to go with B- right now for offense. For defense, this is kind of tricky for me. I'd have to go with C+, B-. I know it doesn't look great. It doesn't look like the dominant defenses of the past few years, but they're actually statistically one of the best defenses in the NFL, surprisingly. I think they have the third or fourth, or I think second best passer rating allowed of any defense in the NFL. They have, I think, fifth or sixth in points allowed. They're one of the best in defensive secondaries, surprisingly, even without Stephon Gilmore, with Jalen Mills as one of your starting cornerbacks. It's just they're not being consistent enough. You have the games like they played against, even the Chargers game is a perfect example. For most of the game, one of the best games they've had in a few years, but then they had that 41-yard pass to Keenan Allen, and then they had the horrendous running play where they stopped him on the 5-yard line and then got pushed back into the end zone for a touchdown. And then 2 series later, they had the 75-yard run. So they've even been inconsistent during games, but then they'll have a game like against Tampa Bay where they were phenomenal. And then against the Cowboys, they were horrendous. So I think if they start, maybe it's Bill taking over, like we mentioned earlier this week, maybe that has something to do with it if they can start getting better. But it seems like it's going to be more of the Matt Patricia defenses where statistically they might not look great, but they'll be one of the top 2, 3, 4 scoring defenses. They'll bend but not break. And you just have to hope that they don't finally break in the big games like the 2017 defense where they were the number 1 scoring defense, but against the Eagles, they gave up 400 plus yards, 30 plus points. And then special teams, I'd have to go with a B, just because Nick Falk is having an absolutely amazing season so far. Their punt returns are getting better. The last 4 games, Gunner is averaging 18.5 yards per return. Jake Bailey, like you said, he doesn't look the same, but if you actually look at the numbers, his yards per punt is actually only less than 2 yards lower than last year. It's better than his rookie year. They did have the punt protection issues where they've had 2 blocked punts, but overall, it doesn't look as good as last year. But last year was also a historic punt season. I think he had the number 1 net average, at least last year, but I think it might have been one of the highest all time as well. So I think everything's trending in the right direction, which is why it was kind of tough to do the grades. But I'd say overall B- for the team. I think if you're to see how close all these games were, just not looking at the final outcome, I think you'd have to go a little higher. But since they are 4-4, I'd have to go with a B- overall.
Yeah, I don't think we're too far off on most of these things. So kind of going into our 5 up, 5 down for the season. Where would you go for your 5 up if you want to just list them all and kind of explain it afterwards? And then I can do so for mine, and then we can vice versa for the downs.
Of course. For this one, I was deciding between doing 3 up and 5 up. I ultimately went with 5 up because usually, as you know, every week I have trouble going with 3 for a single game, let alone 3 for 8 games. So I decided 5 up is kind of better since it's looking at 8 games worth of numbers. Number 1 just has to go with Mac Jones. He's 8th in the NFL in passing yards. He's on pace for about 4,000 yards for a 16 game season, which is pretty ridiculous coming into the season. I don't think any of us thought that. He's playing beyond his years, and it looks like he's getting better and better each week. So I'm not saying he's the best person on the entire team. I think my number 2 is, but just for what my expectations were for him coming into the year, he hasn't. I think someone else said this, that he hasn't had any of those what the hell was that plays this year, other than probably the first series of the season against the Dolphins where he like tried to spike it at Jonnu Smith's feet, but it was backwards. Besides that, he hasn't had any what the hell was that kind of plays, which you typically see a lot of from a rookie. Number 2 is Matthew Judon, 8 sacks, 39 pressures. He's 2 sacks away from breaking his single season high, and it's only 8 games into the season. And he actually has a decent realistic shot of breaking the Patriots single season record. Single season record is 18.5 by Hall of Famer Andre Tippett. Number 2 is 16.5 by Andre Tippett. And then the Patriots single season high in the Belichick era is only 12.5 by Chandler Jones in 2015 and Mike Vrabel in 2007, which is 3rd all time in Patriots history. So he's only 5 sacks away from being 3rd all time and number 1 in Belichick era. And there's still 9 games to go. He's just been unbelievable. The impact he has on the defense, even in the passing games, him chipping tight ends in their route, throwing them off, has just been phenomenal to watch. Number 3, Christian Barrimore, 2nd on the team in pressures behind Judon. He's getting better and better each week. He's getting double and triple teamed every week, and he's still getting pressure, disrupting plays. He doesn't look like a rookie defensive tackle at all. He looks like he's a potentially Pro Bowl defensive tackle right now as a rookie, which is showing that he's probably the steal of the draft. Number 4, have to go with Nick Falk, 20 for 21 on field goals, 16 of 19 on point after attempts. So he's missed 3 point after attempts, but he's only missed 1 field goal, which was that 56-yarder in the rain for a career long against the Bucs. He's already tied his career high with 50-plus yard field goals with 3, and he's leading the league in scoring. He's having a historic season so far. And then my number 5, I was deciding between 2 players. I ended up going with Adrian Phillips just because of the expectations that they had going into the season. He's been phenomenal in coverage, considering the other safety and their deficiencies in the secondary. Most of his career when he was with the Chargers was with special teams. When he was an first team All-Pro, it was as special teams. He did play some defense, more defense than like Justin Bethel, but he wasn't really known as being a good defender. He was known as a good special teamer with some occasional defense played. He's been one of your most dependable defensive players this year, especially in the secondary. Who would your and my just honorable mention I was deciding between was Michael Onwenu.
Oh, that's interesting on the throw there. So mine are basically almost the same as yours, except for the last person. Matthew Judon, Christian Barrimore, Nick Falk, Mac Jones, and Damian Harris. So Judon, like you had said, it's not really much repeat. I'll be just repeating pretty much everything you said. Judon has been an absolute beast. He's a problem that every sort of offense coordinator that goes up against this team has to think of. And even we saw it in the Chargers game, he was getting they had a plan to attack him, and he was still going up against it. And he was getting held most of the time too, and still able to get to the quarterback. So that kind of just shows how good he's been this year. Christian Barrimore again has been getting double and triple teamed and is still causing an issue. And that kind of that 1-2 punch between the two of them, Barrimore up the middle, Judon from the edge, has been really good for the pass rush. Those two are probably the only two getting pass rush besides a little bit of Lawrence Guy right now. But they're, I would say, your top two defensive players right now. Nick Falk, like you had said, he's been automatic. He's been probably more automatic than their two other previous kickers, which we considered the best kickers in the game, Vinatieri and Gostowski, which was something I never expected when they signed Falk, was a year or two ago, whenever that was. And he's just been automatic, and you sometimes forget that he could actually miss one. Mac Jones again, like Ed said before, he's exceeded any of my expectations. He doesn't look like a rookie quarterback. He still does look, there are times when you could tell that he's a rookie, but based on where he is, just the poise and the kind of the character that he has out there, he's not afraid of anything. If you look at his jersey the last few times, he's got blood dripping all over it. He stands in the pocket. He's willing to take a hit. He's not like Jimmy Garoppolo. And he's not afraid to try and come back. If you even just look at a few of the games, there was the Bucs game. He ended up going toe-to-toe with Tom Brady. He went down and should have won the game if it wasn't for a bad decision to try and kick the ball on a monsoon when they realistically probably could have converted that fourth down. You have the Cowboys when he goes down, throws that 70-something yard touchdown, and gets them back in the game. And then when you look at the Texans game, coming back then, and then even that last drive against the Chargers, trying to kill the clock as much as he can, that was a championship type of drive there. And something that he maybe didn't look as great at the beginning of the game and most of the game, but when it really mattered, he really stepped up and made the throws that were necessary. So it's something that I've been really excited for watching him. And I think he's been a key aspect, probably one of the best aspects of the offense this year. And then Damian Harris, he gets better and better as the season is going on. He did have that really key drop, the fumble in the first game, which ended up killing that win. But other than that, he's been extremely dependable. He's been tough. He gets the yards that aren't there to begin with, where, as we had said before, Sony Michel, he would basically get the yards that were blocked for him. Damian Harris gets those extra yards, whereas maybe Michel would get nothing. Damian Harris could get probably 3 or 4 yards out of that, or if Michel would get tackled for a loss, Harris would get at least back to the line of scrimmage. So he's been really special, and I think they need to start utilizing him more, though he does get dinged up a little bit. So I'll go with my 5 down now, and then you can go with yours afterwards. Okay. I'd say my 5 down are Wise, Mills, Wynn / Haran. I couldn't decide between the two tackles. Godchow and Smith. So with Wise, I know it's not really a big surprise. I can't stand him. If we were on a 4-3, I would not have a big problem with him. He's just not big enough to play the edge on a 3-4. And we saw that again on this Chargers game. The 2 large runs that they had, that 70-something yarder and the 24, 32 yarder. I think 32 yarder. He gets pushed back 10 yards. One by just one single blocker by a rookie left tackle. And then he got double teamed. And he has no shot to beat a double team because he's not big enough. He's not strong enough to do that. And it's not really his fault, even though I say I can't stand him. But just the fact that he gets trotted up there all the time, he's completely undersized for the position. He's not a 3-4 end, and he's playing on a position, and he just does. If I was a team, I'd run at him every single time, and double team him every single time because you could push him around like he's made of paper. So I'd say Wise is one of them. He's not in a. I know he's not set for success here, but he's also good. He's got to do something to figure it out if he's going to be playing. Number 2, Mills. And again, this is kind of another sort of situation where it's not really his fault. He wasn't signed here to be a boundary corner at all. He was supposed to be that kind of gadget safety slot corner, that sort of robber sort of thing. And he's kind of playing on a position. But if I was another team, I'd be targeting him every single play because he's probably one of the weakest links at corner. Wynn and Haran, both of them, it's been tough to decide which tackle has been worse. I would probably argue Wynn, but neither of them have looked that great. And if I was the Patriots, I'd be heavily considering if Trent Brown comes back. It's a big if, though, at this point. That I would start him at left tackle and bench Wynn. Godchow was another one. He is a big signing for them, and we had a lot of hope with him because they did well in Miami before. And this could be a situation, I know you and I were talking earlier, where nose tackle or defensive tackle in this scheme, it does take a little bit of time for some people coming from other NFL schemes where they weren't playing this type of coverage, where two gapping wasn't as big of a hallmark of the defense. And you look at Danny Shelton, it took him about a year to kind of get used to this situation. So I'm hoping it's just that situation. Over time, he's going to do better, but he has not done as well as I was hoped for. And he's been a very weak link on that run defense. He's gotten better, a little bit better. He's not as big of an issue as he was the start of the season, but he still isn't where that contract says he should be. Yeah. And then Smith is the same sort of thing. I was hoping for a lot of him. And they started trying to feed them the ball a little bit more. It's just, I still don't trust him right now. He just looks awkward when he's trying to set himself up for the catch. He's not a very fluid route runner, and he's not very fluid with his hands or his feet. And it looks like everything's kind of a big process for him, and his blocking hasn't been as advertised. He's been pushed around a lot. So I think just his blocking and just, I still think he's kind of in his head a little bit from that. What was it, the Saints game? I can't remember exactly what game it was when he had all those issues. But ever since then, he hasn't been the same. And he needs to step it up because there's a reason why they paid him as much money as he got, because he can make people miss. He's a good target to have out there. He just hasn't played as such.
Yeah. And just going on Smith, just the other thing is against the Jets, it looked like he was starting to, when they started feeding him the ball, that he was going to start breaking out, and then he got hurt at the end of the game. So we'll have to see where that goes. I thought of adding him in my bottom five. I ultimately didn't. I thought some of them were similar, but we only have, I think, one that's actually the same. So this should be a good discussion. Number one, I have to go with Isaiah Wynn. So they were the same. Number two, Trent Brown. Okay, number three, what?
I can see that.
Number three, Nelson Aguilar. Number four, Josh Uche. Number five, Kyle Van Noy. Number five was the toughest one for me, deciding between some players. But number one, Isaiah Wynn. Like you said, he's just been too inconsistent this year. He was first round draft pick. He's your left tackle. And then there's some games where he actually played pretty well. The game against the Jets, where is the best game he had of his career. But there's other games where he's been benched. He's just been horrendous. It looks like he's starting to get a little better. He wasn't too bad against the Chargers, in my opinion. I know you had him in your bottom five, but I thought overall he wasn't too bad. But just at least through 8 games, he hasn't played up to expectations. And then especially considering how weak the offensive line was the first 4 or 5 games, you needed him to play better. Looks like he's starting to get there, but we still don't know. He could revert back to what he was the first 4 games. Number 2, Trent Brown. You traded for him. You're paying him $10 million this year to be your right tackle to shore up the right side of the offensive line. And he's just played, I believe, 1 series. I think he got hurt on the first series. Maybe it was the second series.
He played 8 plays, I think.
Yeah. And then he has the same nagging injuries that he had back in Oakland. You're expecting to play his all-pro performance that he was in 2018, and he just hasn't been able to play. And because of that, you've had huge issues the first 4 weeks of the season. Last 4 weeks, it looks like it hasn't been as big of an issue because the offensive line has been playing better. But since you're paying him $10 million, that has pretty much caused you not to be able to go out and make additions to the team, either other additions to the secondary, other additions to the offense, because of how much you're paying him. So just because of him not being able to play, I have to just put him as number 2. Number 3 is Aguilar. He actually had a really good game the first game against Miami, and then after that, he's pretty much disappeared. I know he had a good catch against the Chargers, upon which I texted you saying I can't believe he actually caught that, because usually he drops those. It looks like he has stone hands, which is something that has plagued him his whole career. But you're paying him, I believe his cap hit this year is $8 million, and his cap hit next year is $15 million. With, if you cut him, it's a $10 million dead cap. So that's something I don't really like. And he's pretty much going to be on the books for next year too. But you're paying him so much, and he only has 22 catches, 330 yards, 2 touchdowns. And a lot of those catches came in the first week. So he's pretty much on pace for 44 catches, 660 yards, and 4 touchdowns, which I don't, for a 16-game season, because I'm only going to do 16-game season comparisons. So it's comparable to past years. I don't think that's worth $8 million a year. I don't think that's even worth $5 million a year. And considering you have to pay him next year too, he just hasn't lived up to expectations. Hopefully he can figure it out, start making those break past the defense, getting those long plays, especially since the offensive line is starting to play better. It might allow the Patriots to open up their offense again, and then maybe he'll be able to shine. But so far, he just hasn't been able to. Number 4, Josh Uche, just because going into this year, we saw how well he was playing in training camp, how well he was playing in the preseason. And we thought he was going to take that next step, where maybe not Matthew Judon-esque, but where he's going to be a force, rushing the passer. You'd be able to have both Judon and Uche rushing the passer, causing havoc. And then that allows your secondary, which right now is sort of one of your weak spots on defense, to be able to not have to be as pressed, because you have the quarterback is releasing the ball earlier. He just hasn't shown up. I know he got hurt, I believe, in the second game, either the first game or the second game, and he missed some time, and he just hasn't looked the same after that. Maybe the injury is still nagging him, or something he's still thinking of. But going into the year, we had such high expectations for him, and he's pretty much been non-existent. And then number 5 is Kyle Van Noy. He was a defensive starter for the Dolphins last year from, I think, 14 games. He started pretty much almost every game for the Patriots the previous 3 years. When they signed him on a pretty decent contract, we thought that he's going to definitely help that front 7, shore up their run defense, and then rush the passer, which is 2 issues that have plagued them the last 2 years. Last 2-3 years, they had a horrendous run defense. Last year, Chase Winovich led the Patriots in sacks with 6.5 sacks. This year, through 8 games, Van Noy only has 20 tackles and 1 sack. So definitely just not living up to expectations, at least through this year. So that's my bottom 5. Any thoughts or on any of those people? Any you disagree with?
Yeah, the only one I would say would be Josh Uche, and I feel like he's not being set up for success because he's kind of lagged behind. He either Wise or Kyle Van Noy, and he's not getting a huge amount of playing time right now. So I think part of the reason why he hasn't been seen as much is because he's not taking the field as much. Whereas, and they do this a lot, where they prefer to play veteran players, or if they feel like he could be a risk in the run game, they would only play him on passing downs, which Wise is a risk in the run game. So I'm not sure what the kind of the difference is, why you wouldn't play Uche versus him there, or why Van Noy's still out there when he clearly there's something either nagging him or he's washed up, because I know he's been on the injury report a lot with either a groin or a foot, or has been nagging kind of things around there. He looks kind of like he has one of those issues going on, because he doesn't look as quick as he used to be. Not like he was the fastest guy in the world before, but he does look slower and hasn't been as impactful. So that's really the only thing I would kind of disagree there with a little bit.
The one thing I would just add, though, is even when he does, I know he hasn't been seeing the field as much as we thought. That's something that I've been actually calling for, is him seeing the field more. But when he has seen the field, he just hasn't been productive. I have his stats up. The first 2 games against Miami and Jets, 3 sacks, 4 total tackles. After that, I know he missed 2 games, but in the 4 following games, 4 total tackles, no sacks in 4 games. So when he has seen the field after his injury, he just hasn't been able to be productive, which I thought he was going to be one of your best defensive players this year.
Yeah, I can say. So kind of going to projections for the end of the season record. You and I had said they're probably going to be 11-6, or 12-5 ish. I couldn't really pick, with a range of 10-7 to 14-3. You said 12-5, and you had range, same exact range, 10-7 to 14-3. Well, I guess we can all say 14-3 can be thrown out the window because they've had 4 losses already. I can give my projection, any revised projection, and then you can give yours and have some comment. I'm going to stick with 11-6 right now. So I'm going to be going down with the ship if that happens. But I was just looking again at the schedule before this, and as hard as we originally thought it was going to be, the second half, it actually could end up being not too bad right now. So some of the games that you thought could have been issues, the Browns, the Titans, the Colts, they're not looking the same as they were before with Baker Mayfield being hurt and that OBJ problem over there. Derrick Henry being out for the Titans is a huge injury because he basically is their offense. And the Colts have not looked that great. And Carson Wentz isn't looking like we thought he would have been with the Eagles beforehand when he had the same coach over there. So those ones that were kind of iffy are not as difficult as they were before. So the way I'm thinking about it is they could even get to 12 wins. I wouldn't be shocked there, but it would cause them to win most of their games and split with the Bills, which just seems highly unlikely for the amount of games that are left. But I could see them losing one of those games and then splitting with the Bills. Or winning all those other games and losing both Bills games. So 11-6, I would still say for this. I think that's a decent shot that could actually happen, assuming they stay on the same path the way they're looking between the Jets and then the Chargers game. If they completely come out against the Panthers and look like garbage, then I would completely revisit this and say that maybe this was a fluke like last year's Chargers game was. Or maybe it's just the Chargers and not the way that you're playing. So it'll be interesting to see. But I do have faith in this team, and I do have faith in Mac Jones. So
no, I have similar sentiments. So I know I texted you something
sticking
different.
with your guns.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
My heart says yes, but my brain says no. So my heart thinks they're gonna go 12-5, where they split with the Bills. I texted you a couple days ago. I think they win the next 4 games. They lose at the Bills, then they win out. My brain is just saying just how many games that is left. 9 games. I don't know if they win 8 of 9. So I think ultimately they finish 11-6. They lose at the Bills, and then they lose one of those other 3 games, either at the Browns, home versus the Bills, or at the Colts. I think the Colts could be a sneaky game that they lose. Just because Wentz hasn't been the same, but he has been playing better lately, and he actually has one of the least amount of turnovers in the NFL, which is something that's not Carson Wentz-esque. So I think ultimately they finish 11-6, maybe the second wild card.
Yeah, even at that point, they could even rival the Bills, depending on what happens with the Bills.
It's going to be
going forward.
Bills is going to be tough though, because unless the Patriots sweep the Bills or the Bills lose to either the Dolphins or the Jets, the Bills hold the tiebreaker over the Patriots. Second tiebreaker goes to end the division. Yeah.
Nope, that's true. So there goes the division hopes, unless if they do control they control their destiny. So if they win out the rest of the year, they're division champions. So and actually probably I would say highly likely to be the number 1 seed based on how the rest of the AFC is looking. But
I agree.
That would be something.
AFC North is too compact. The AFC West is crap. AFC South is crap now that Derrick Henry's gone. So if they win out, I think the winner of the AFC East is going to be the number 1 seed.
Yeah. That's highly likely. So looking forward just to the Panthers this week. I don't think we have much to really kind of go over there, but just to kind of briefly talk about it. What your initial thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so I think we have a different thought now than we did after week 3. After week 3, they look like one of the better teams in the NFL. They were 3-0. Sam Darnold was playing well. I do remember though, after that week 3 game, we had one of the questions we had was, which of these 7 undefeated teams, who are 2 mirages that are not as good as they're playing? I know I said the Broncos and the Panthers, and you didn't agree with the Panthers. But anyway, Panthers right now 4-4. Sam Darnold, good the first 4 games, threw over 270 yards those 4 games, but after that has been horrendous. I think he eclipsed 210 once and the other times in the 100s, and he might not even play this week. He didn't practice today, at least in the media portion, so it's looking like PJ Walker, their backup quarterback, is going to play, which he doesn't scare me. I know he scares some people like Evan Lazar, but in his limited playing time, which you can only base it off of, he's an undrafted free agent in 2017. Last year was his first year on an NFL active roster. He went 32 of 56 last year for 368 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions in 1 start, and then 4 games total. This year, 3 of 15, so 20 completion percentage, 33 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He is athletic, so he does have that mobile threat, but so does Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has been running a decent amount for the Panthers, which is kind of how he actually got his concussion. But I think their passing game doesn't scare me that much. If Christian McCaffrey is able to come back healthy and play like the Christian McCaffrey old, it might be a closer game. But coming off a hamstring injury, unless he's 100%, I'm not really expecting him to be the dynamic Christian McCaffrey. On their offense, they have DJ Moore, who's one of the probably underrated wide receivers in the NFL. Last 2 years, had over almost 1,200 receiving yards both years. This year, he's on pace for about the same. He's on pace for actually almost 1,300 yards and over 100 catches. Chuba Hubbard, who's their running back, taking the place of Christian McCaffrey, he's actually been pretty decent. Only 3.6 yards per carry, but he's been running a decent amount, 400 yards halfway through the season. And then Robbie Anderson is their number 2 wide receiver. Great year last year, over almost 100 catches and almost 1,100 yards. This year, not so much. 18 catches, 204 yards. And then back when he used to play for the Jets, Bill always shut him down week after week. So he knows how to game plan for him, but their offense doesn't scare me that much. If Christian McCaffrey is able to play, I think that they're going to be able to possibly score more points, but I don't see how the Panthers could win unless the Patriots beat themselves. That's my thoughts on the offense. I don't know if you want to touch on the offense before we touch on their defense, or if you want.
Yeah, I think like you had said, Darnold and McCaffrey, it doesn't look like either of them are going to play this week. Even though they took McCaffrey off of IR, which I'm not really sure why you did that if you're going to have him ride the bike in practice. But so Darnold doesn't look like it based on the comments, and so is McCaffrey. And without McCaffrey, it's a completely different offense where the offense goes through McCaffrey. But he just can't stay healthy ever. So he's kind of been a big kind of pain for them when he gets hurt. Like you had said, DJ Moore has been really good for them this year. I actually have my fantasy team, so I get to reap those benefits every single week. He's always productive every week, grabbing touchdowns. And then Anderson, like you said, I also had him for a while and sat him on the bench and ended up cutting him because he's been kind of worthless. So those are kind of my thoughts on that. And the only other thing is Chuba Hubbard sounds like the Chubbawamba, the song. So I don't really have any thoughts on that. I just
love
to bring that up. Yeah. Defense. I don't really have much thoughts other than really the biggest kind of storyline is Gilmore matching up against the Patriots. He only played 13 snaps last game. I think all of them were against Kyle Pitts. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
It was either all or most. But
and then Matt Rule this week was saying to expect about the same amount of snaps for him as last game. He was playing predominantly on third down for them last week. So I'd probably expect, if he's expecting about the same kind of workload, would be probably third down situations. I was looking at some of the film from last week. He didn't look too bad. He didn't look as quick to the ball as he was before, but it's also his first game back. So he probably isn't in football shape right now. And it's just going to be interesting to see later on in the season Is it a football shape, or is he just not as explosive as before because of that quad injury and being 32 years old or something like that?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. He's very tough still, though. He was playing very up on Pitts. He was very physical. He held a couple of times. But I would, if I was to attack Gilmore, which I would like them to, just to try and show that they didn't need him,
I think they'll do.
They need to do some sort of double moves on him, stuff to kind of expose that explosiveness right now. You don't want to target him on those short underneath patterns because he still can guard those. He did pretty well against Pitts with those. So I would expose him on that speed aspect there, and hope that they're not giving him help over the top. Because if that's the case, I probably just won't target him then. But anything that can kind of expose that quickness and kind of lack of football shape right now, where it does take probably 2 to 4 games to really get into. So that would be my game plan versus him.
No, I agree. The thing that I still am having trouble fully wrapping my head around is how good this Panthers defense really is. I know they're top 5, top 10 in most categories. They're third in third down percentage at 32%, fifth in points allowed at 19.9, second in passing yards allowed, only at 189 yards a game, fourth in sack percentage, 7.6% of dropbacks, only behind Browns, Bears, and Vikings. Fourth best in drives leading to scores. So only 30.6% of drives lead to scores, and they're only behind the Bills, Cardinals, and Broncos. The thing that is making me I know those stats look good, and they have a very good secondary. AJ Boye, very good cornerback. Jeremy Chin, one of the best young safeties in the NFL, came in second in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting last year. But they haven't really faced too many good offenses. First game versus the Jets, they destroyed the Jets. Jets aren't that good of a team. Saints the second week, their offense isn't the same as it was last year with Jameis Winston under quarterback. Then Texans, Cowboys, one of the best offenses in football. They allowed 36 points. Then they faced the Eagles. I'm not a big fan of Jalen Hurts. Vikings, I think, has a good offense, but then Giants and Falcons. So they have great numbers, but they haven't really gone up against good offenses outside of the Cowboys and the Vikings. So I don't know how much of it is just the competition that they face and how much of it is how good they really are. Another aspect that might actually be a key in the game is special teams. They have the fourth best punt return average of only 5.6 yards per return, but that's also part of it due to their dead last in yards per punt of under 39 yards per punt attempt. So if they're only punting the ball 39 yards, and then even if you give up 5.5, 6 yards, that's going to put the defense for the Panthers in a bad situation because the offense is going to be in better scoring position. And that's one of their things as well. They're also third and worst opponent starting field position at starting at almost the 32-yard line. So I think if Gunner, who has been very good the last 4 games in punt returns, if he's able to get some yards, even if the punts aren't great, I think that the Patriots can have an advantage just because of field position due to how bad the Panthers special teams is. They also have the 5th worst kick return average of 27 yards. So their special teams isn't great, and that might be something that Bill is going to try and exploit this week as well.
Yeah. I think it should be pretty interesting to see what they end up doing. Kind of going into your prediction for this week. Patriots are favored by 3.5, as reported by, is that Yahoo that you use? And the over under at 41.5. Who are you taking in this game? Who are you taking for the points? And then what's your over under?
So it's the tricky thing is if McCaffrey and Darnold play, I think if both of them play, I think it's a closer game. I'm going with the assumption that Darnold's not playing and McCaffrey is going to play, but only play limited. So I think the Patriots win 31-13.
Son of a bitch.
I think that the offense is going to be productive. I think they're going to be stopped a few times. I think the Panthers secondary is actually pretty good. I think that they're not going to be able to score that 38, 40 plus points. But I don't see the Panthers offense without Christian McCaffrey being healthy and without Sam Darnold, I don't see them putting up a lot of points. Granted, Davis Mills put on a lot of points against you and shredded your defense, but the way that they've been playing the past 3 weeks, I don't see how Panthers can score a lot. So I'm going to go 31-13. Take the over and the spread.
Well, I'm going to say exactly the same as score as you, as I had said, for 31-13. My assumption is that neither Donald or McCaffrey are playing this week. I think it's going to make it a lot easier for the Patriots defense. Give them a little bit of a break, and then the offense is going to have a bounce back game from the Chargers game and look a lot better. As we've also seen with Mac, he's kind of really, I don't want to compare him to Brady, but whereas Brady didn't have 2 bad games in a row, he learned from mistakes. Mac is really good at learning and not making the same mistakes again. So I think that will be pretty key on that game. So 31-13. Anything else you'd like to discuss?
I think we covered most of it.
All right. Well, thank you again for everyone for joining us for this bonus episode. You can follow us again at Pat's 300 Level Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to follow us on YouTube and watch that there if you're only consuming them on the podcast feed. Just be sure to subscribe, rate, and review both on YouTube and our Apple or Spotify, or however how you consume your podcast. Thank you very much, and we'll be talking to you next week.